Looking back, my life always felt meticulously planned, as if each chapter was carefully outlined before it began. I grew up in a quiet suburban neighborhood where stability reigned supreme. My parents stayed married for over 5 decades, and their relationship became my benchmark for a successful partnership. Naturally, I assumed my own marriage would follow a similar path: enduring love, unwavering trust, and a bond unshaken by time. When I first met Joyce at a friend's wedding, I believed that dream had finally started to unfold. For years, I thought we were building that ideal together. Joyce had a way of brightening the ordinary, her laughter filling the cracks of daily routine. We raised 2 kids, built a comfortable life, and created traditions I hoped would last forever. But lately I'd begun questioning everything, trying to pinpoint where things had shifted. Were there signs I had missed? Or was I just clinging too hard to what I thought we had? I steered my trusty Jeep Cherokee down the open highway, the familiar of the engine filling the quiet moments between bursts of chatter from the back seat. My 2 kids, caught up in their usual debate over which movie to watch on the entertainment system, provided a steady background noise. Beside me, Joyce, my wife of 2 decades, stared silently out the window, her expression clouded with something I couldn't quite place. She had no idea what lay ahead. Joyce looks ordinary, not beautiful, but not unattractive. Her light brown hair framed her face, setting off her blue eyes. Though her legs were a bit thick, I always loved them, along with her generously sized hips, a feature she tried to tone down over the years but never could. She was slimmer on top, which wasn't my preference, but it didn't matter. I loved Joyce, flaws and all, ever since I first saw her 21 years ago. Back then, I was 20, and she was 22. I knew she was the one I'd marry. But today would be our last day together. The kids knew. But Joyce was clueless. We were headed to our favorite state park for a final family picnic before Brian left for his sophomore year, and our daughter set off for her senior year exchange program in Europe. Tomorrow morning, I was supposed to be leaving for a business trip, but in truth, I was just leaving. As the kids settled into their movie, we started the 2-hour drive. Joyce loved these picnics where we could escape the hustle at home and enjoy each other's company in a peaceful setting. She liked the park even more because I never took my Mustang there. It wasn't suited for rough roads and had a small back seat that wouldn't fit the kids. Joyce had been jealous of the Mustang from the start, calling it my 3rd child and later my 2nd wife. I joked that I needed a 2nd wife since she was always busy with her events and activities. I glanced at her relaxed face as we drove. I reached for the radio and turned it on. A Fleetwood Mac song came on. And though I didn't immediately recognize it, the signature beat by Mick Fleetwood and John McVie's strong bass lines soon gave it away. Years ago, I played guitar in heavy metal bands. Before that, my parents made me learn classical piano to teach me discipline and structure. Music became a key part of my life, helping me through tough times. Even now, I can't start my morning run without my iPod. The music I choose sets my mood and influences my daily decisions, often reflecting what I'm feeling. This time, the song was almost prophetic. Little Lies by Fleetwood Mac, not one of my favorites, felt painfully fitting. Just as Christine McVie started singing, Joyce changed the station. If I could turn the page in time, I'd turn over in just a day or 2, the lyrics went. Leave it, I told her. Close my eyes, echoed Stevie Nicks and Lindsey Buckingham. Christine's voice sang of believing, which mirrored our situation. Tell me, lies filled the car, almost as if the band was with us. In the rearview mirror, my daughter caught my eye. She understood the song's weight. She returned to her movie, and Joyce looked out the window as I thought about what those words meant to me, to us. I'd always loved Joyce deeply. She wasn't a stunning beauty, but her personality and positive spirit drew me in when we met. Our shared life made me think no one else could ever matter. Until 2 weeks ago, when I discovered her affair with Matt Blake. Christine's lyrics about turning back time resonated. If I could, I'd change the day Joyce met Matt and the day she first betrayed me, but I couldn't. So I gave her this day, one last perfect day with the family she said she loved, one more day with the husband she had betrayed, A final idyllic picnic at her favorite spot before everything fell apart. As I drove, she reached for my hand. "I love you, Bill," she said with a smile. "Sometimes I forget to show it but never doubt it." My daughter let out a sarcastic snort from the back seat. I couldn't tell if it was because of her movie or something her mom said. The thought crossed my mind. Sweet little lies. "I think it's because you're all so busy with school, work, and activities. I'm stuck at home feeling like I have no life. That's why my groups and charities matter so much," Joyce said. "Why not just get a dog, Mom?" my daughter chimed in. I stayed quiet, lost in how Stevie Nicks' voice could still give me chills after all these years. She still looked good too, even at 50 or more. "You understand, don't you, Bill?" Joyce asked. "Sometimes you realize you can't just watch, you have to act." "Oh, he understands more than you know," Jessica said from the back. "No arguments today, Jess," I replied. "Let's just enjoy this day together. No fights, no negativity." Joyce nodded, smiling. My eyes met Jessica's in the mirror. She bit her lip and said, "Okay." Joyce squeezed my hand and leaned on my shoulder. She moved to kiss me, but I turned to read the passing sign, smoothly avoiding it. Jessica's giggle told me she noticed. I had to act the part of the devoted husband for the rest of the day. If I didn't, this final gift to Joyce would be ruined. While we ate, I wondered why she did it. Had she stopped loving me? Or did she never treat me as I treated her? Maybe, as she said, we were all busy, and she wasn't. But that was her choice. She decided the rat race wasn't for her. She chose to be a stay-at-home wife. Joyce picked our house, the cars, the kids' schools. She set the vacations and plans. If she was unhappy, she could have said so. I also wondered, what did Matt Blake have that I didn't? Was it just his age? Though with his receding hairline, you'd barely guess he was younger. He was 35. I was 40. Not a big difference. I wasn't an Olympic athlete, but I stayed in decent shape. Matt, on the other hand, was soft and out of shape, so it likely wasn't about looks. Thankfully, after my suspicions were confirmed by investigators, I did a DNA test to be sure. My kids were indeed mine, though it was obvious from their appearance. Brian, who looks just like I did at his age, has already found the girl he wants to marry, Maggie Chu, a petite Asian girl he met at school. I wonder if he trusts her as much after our conversation about his mother. Brian, unlike Jessica and me, struggles to hide his emotions. He loves Joyce, but is furious with her and can't bring himself to speak to her. Jessica, on the other hand, is so angry she's itching for a confrontation. She's my biggest worry today. Jessica promised to behave during the picnic, but I doubt she'll keep it together the whole time. She's set to leave after I do tomorrow, and I suspect things will get interesting then. She has no respect for her mother, and has already told me she wants to live with me when she returns from Paris in the spring. I told her she's always welcome. But at 17, a judge would likely decide that during the divorce. Divorce. The word stings. It's strange how a few letters can bring down everything you've built and hurt worse than any physical blow. As we arrived at the park, I paid the entrance fee at the booth. "Maybe we should get those plates that let us in without paying," Joyce suggested. With the kids gone, I didn't think we'd come here much, I said. "This is our favorite spot," Joyce replied. "We'll come as often as we can, like always." "Just the two of us?" I asked skeptically. "Of course," she smiled. "There's no one I'd rather come here with." Even as she spoke, I could almost hear Stevie Nicks singing, "Tell Me a Lie" in that deep, soulful voice. Within minutes, we were unloading food, blankets and supplies. "Jess, don't put the blanket too close to the grill," I called out. "Okay, Dad," she said cheerfully. I only moved it closer to Mom because she was cold. "No, honey, I didn't say that," Joyce said. "You must be thinking of another time." Jessica, now beside me, whispered so only I could hear. I was getting used to the weather in hell. I turned and looked at Jessica, realizing for the first time how much the family's breakdown was affecting the kids. I knew I was heartbroken, but they were suffering too. Brian had Maggie for emotional support, But even their relationship was strained due to Joyce's actions. He trusted Maggie less and grew more suspicious of her outings. Jessica, my little girl, was clearly dealing with anger. I needed to talk to the program director to arrange therapy for her and strengthen our connection. I also needed to move from the apartment I planned to a house. "Dad, ready for our stone throwing contest at the lake?" Brian asked. It was our tradition, and while he won until he was 16, I had stopped letting him win after that. Lately, he was getting close to striking me. Maybe this year he would. "Later, champ," I replied. "Let's get the grill going first." He nodded, smiling, and pulled out his phone to call Maggie. "Dad, there's no signal here," he said, frustrated. I just laughed. "Brian, let's race to the lake." Jessica shouted, sprinting off before Brian even noticed. For now, I was alone facing the moment I dreaded all day. Joyce laid out a blanket and motioned for me to join her. "I need to get the grill going," I said, "but save me a spot. I'd been looking forward to this all morning." My acting was getting better. Joyce wasn't the only one who could tell sweet lies. What happened next, though childish, was one of my best performances. Joyce blew me a kiss and I caught it, pretending to touch my face while subtly discarding it and stepping on it. She didn't notice and smiled. "I wonder what you do with a real kiss," she said. "We'll find out later," I replied. Those little lies were contagious. "I'm going to look for wildflowers," she said. "Have something ready when I get back. And if you see Jess, send her to join me. She loves picking flowers." I nodded as she walked away. She paused and turned back. "Bill, I'm so glad you insisted I come today. There's nowhere I'd rather be. We need more time like this. Life has gotten so busy and we take each other for granted because we think we'll always be here. Let's go back to doing things together." She walked off smiling to pick flowers, the sweetest lie I'd ever heard. A tear slid down my cheek as I remembered how much I loved her, knowing that without my insistence she'd probably be with Matt now. I set up the charcoal in one of the park's grills, soaking it in lighter fluids since self-igniting ones never work. Familiar routines let my mind drift. I remembered crying while watching the DVD the detectives gave me. Alone in my office while Joyce was at a charity meeting, I saw Matt come to our house a few days before when the kids and I were gone. Charity starts at home, I thought bitterly. Joyce, after making sure no one saw, eagerly pulled him inside. The camera in the living room captured them on our couch drinking coffee, tension palpable. They exchanged small talk, making me wonder why Matt put up with it. Then Joyce made the first move, sealing any chance of forgiveness. She asked if her legs looked fat, mentioning that I loved them, but she thought they were old and heavy. He replied he couldn't judge from what he saw, and she lifted her skirt higher. "What I see looks good," Matt said with lust. "But it's hard to judge with incomplete information." "Wanna see the whole thing?" Joyce teased, smiling. I knew from her expression what would happen next. She raised her skirt all the way. "Oh God," Matt muttered. "Come and get it," Joyce invited. Matt leaned in, and their awkward, clumsy movements began. There was no grace, just an uncoordinated mess that looked almost comical. I wondered if, caught up in their passion, they realized how ridiculous they appeared. Did Matt know what his actions would cost him? He likely had no idea what was coming in 24 hours. As for Joyce, I hoped she'd find happiness in her new life. I resolved to handle this gracefully without primal reactions. The better man had won. My only priority was ensuring my children were secure before stepping away. My lawyers would deliver the divorce and settlement terms. No negotiations. Joyce would accept my offer or get nothing. I offered Joyce very little in the settlement. If we went through a full-blown divorce, her reputation would be completely ruined. I would make sure her standing in the community was destroyed, forcing her to step back from her committees and charities. The kids wouldn't be affected. Brian would be across the country at school and Jessica would be in Paris. It would be easiest for Joyce to accept my terms and move on while I did the same. That day, sitting in my den, I was so engrossed in the scene unfolding on the screen that I didn't hear Jessica come in until she was right behind me. She gently wiped the tears from my face. Now you know, she whispered. I nodded silently, unable to find my voice. I wanted to tell you, Dad, but I couldn't do it without hurting you, Jessica confessed. How long have you known? I managed to ask, my voice tight. Since the beginning, she said. They flirted for months, but it only lasted 2 weeks. I overheard Mom telling Susan she was going to end it, so it should be over soon. It's too late, I said, the weight of my words settling heavily between us. Things changed the moment it started. Can't you forgive her, Dad? Jessica's eyes searched mine, hopeful yet cautious. Sorry, Angel. I'm not the forgiving type, I admitted. A small bitter smile crossed her face. Good. I'm not going to forgive her either. Jessica, we need to handle this calmly, I said, my tone firm. Don't tell anyone or treat your mother differently. A penny for your thoughts? Joyce's voice startled me. I hadn't heard her approach. Maybe don't light this yet, she said, noticing the soaked coals. I took my second bag, removed the saturated coals, tossed them in the lake to prevent a fire, and set the fresh coals in the grill, lightly dousing them before lighting them. Come sit with me while we wait for the fire, Joyce said, smiling. I sat beside her, and she held my hand. Bill, on the way here, I had a thought, she said. We haven't discussed this, but we're starting a new chapter. We've had a great life so far, and I'm looking forward to the next phase. I don't think it's over yet. I looked at her like I didn't really get her point. Truthfully, I just wanted to be as far away from her as possible. I probably shouldn't have let my mind drift to watching that video of her and Matt. Just looking at her made me feel sick. All right, honey. I can tell you're confused, she said. Being here with the people I care about the most has given me a new perspective. And to be honest, what Jess said made me think. Our kids had grown up and moved out, and I felt old, unattractive, and useless. I guess I needed to bring some excitement back into my life. I was stunned. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. Was this woman really about to admit to an affair? I'd never encountered anything like this before. What about my plans? What about my revenge? Damn, this ruined everything. So I joined all these pointless committees thinking they'd make me feel better, but they only pushed us further apart. Whether we like it or not, we've grown distant over the past few weeks. I muttered, pretending to ponder her words. Just get to the part where you started hooking up with the bald 35-year-old janitor who still lives with his mom, I thought. It's been 2 weeks since we've had sex, you know, she said, looking at me for a reaction. Of course, I thought. Why on earth would I touch you after seeing that video with Matt? No, honey. I hadn't noticed, I said, playing along with my own small eyes. Well, I know you've been waiting for the day we could run around the house without clothes, she said. You always joke about burning my clothes, so I'd always be without clothes for whenever you want me. She smiled. But I guess that will have to wait. That'll have to wait until hell freezes over, I thought. We're not old enough to retire just yet, Bill, she said with a smile. I love you, and I want us to have another child. Suddenly, I couldn't breathe. I started choking and coughing. Joyce patted my back, trying to help me catch my breath. A whirlwind of thoughts raced through my mind. Maybe she was already pregnant with Matt's child and wanted to pin it on me. I dismissed that. It was too soon to tell. Maybe she planned to get pregnant by Matt and pretend it was mine. Maybe she felt guilty and wanted to revive our bed life, which she had unknowingly wrecked. I didn't know. I didn't care. I just wanted to get through this last day and then move on. Surprisingly, Christine McVie's song popped into my head, and I found the answer there. The second verse goes, even though I don't make plans, I hope you understand there's a reason why. Joyce, let's not make plans right now. I hope you understand there's a reason I don't want to plan anything at the moment, I said, echoing the song's words. Oh, you want me all to yourself for a bit? She said with a smile. That's so selfish. Have you been having naughty thoughts about what we'll do when the kids leave? I just nodded and smiled. Like the song says, we'd be better off breaking up. Let's give that a try. Lately, Joyce brought out the worst in me. She placed my hand over her heart and pulled it to her chest. Right on cue, Jessica appeared. "Are we going to grill anything or what?" she asked. "Dad, should my stomach suffer because of your hormones all day?" I nodded, thankful for her interruption, and went to the grill. I put hot dogs, burgers, steaks, and some chicken breasts on it along with a couple of salmon fillets wrapped in foil. "Maybe I understand why you want just the two of us for a bit," Joyce said, sneaking up on me again. "Dad, the lake's waiting," Brian called. I shrugged and followed him, Jessica trailing behind as the self-appointed judge. Brian's first stone almost hit a log some kids had dragged to the middle of the lake. It was a solid throw, and he grinned at it. "Top that, Dad," he said, smiling. I picked up a rock, still thinking of Matt's bald head and pale face. When I threw it, I pictured punching him square in the face. "Whoa, Dad," Brian shouted. "Where did that come from?" "Your rock flew over the log. It went halfway across the lake." Both he and Jessica stared at me surprised. "Let's eat," I said, trying to sound upbeat. "We shouldn't leave your mom alone for too long." "Yeah. Or we might catch her with the Forester," Jessica joked. I was startled, but Brian just laughed. Back at camp, only the hot dogs were ready, so we ate those. After lunch, Brian said he was full and went to nap in the Jeep. Joyce wanted to show Jessica the wildflowers, but Jessica asked me to walk with her instead. Joyce, never one for hiking, set off to pick her flowers. As we walked, I tried to explain to Jess that what was happening between Joyce and me had nothing to do with her. I told her that we would always be her parents, and that we both loved her. I also tried to make her understand that her mother would need her support in the days ahead because it would be hard for her when she realized I was gone. "Why should I help the woman who destroyed our family?" Jessica asked. I didn't really have an answer, so I just said, "Because she's your mother and you love her." "Dad, men don't notice anything," Jess said. "If there's something right in front of them, they don't see it unless it's work, football, or cars. But girls and women notice the smallest things. Probably half the girls I know see it too. It's embarrassing." I stopped and just looked at her. "I love you, Daddy," she said. "In the spring, when I come home from school and during Christmas break, I'll come stay with you." The rest of the day flew by. We played a lot of family games, tossed a frisbee around, and looked at the clouds trying to spot shapes. We ate a lot and even went with Joyce to see her favorite wildflowers. When we were tired from picking flowers, we returned to camp for dinner. My son almost ruined everything himself. "It's hard to believe we'll never do this again," Brian said. "Of course we will," Joyce said. And Brian, Jess, and I stared at her in shock. But what I meant was Brian tried to correct himself. "I know what you meant, honey," Joyce said. "Maybe next time you can bring Maggie, and maybe Jessica will bring someone too. Then maybe you and Maggie will make me a grandmother, but we'll always come here. It's a family tradition." She nudged me with her elbow and added, "So that might make it even better." Brian smiled, relieved he hadn't spilled the secret. Joyce leaned in to kiss me, not noticing the angry look Jessica shot at her older brother. I've lost count of how many times I kissed Joyce over the years, but this kiss felt different. It was like the sadness in Brian's words made her put more into it, as if she believed our whole relationship depended on this one moment. "Have you thought about my proposal?" she asked, her eyes full of hope. Her eyes were so full of love, adoration, and passion that, for a split second, I almost forgot my anger. They say the eyes are the windows to the soul. When I looked into Joyce's eyes, I saw love. For a fleeting moment, I thought about having one last night with her. Maybe her wish could come true. But then I realized that if she got pregnant, I'd never be able to walk away from my child. Besides, I hated the idea of her raising my kid in Matt's mom's basement. As we loaded the Jeep, the sky grew darker. We yawned as we set off for home. The return trip would take longer since we needed to drop Brian at the airport. He was catching a red-eye flight back to college to spend an extra day with Maggie before classes resumed. Maggie had already returned that afternoon, and I don't think she knew he was coming. I suspected Brian wanted to surprise her late at night to see if she was there and, more importantly, if she was alone. Damn Joyce for shattering our children's lives with her deceit. Her insecurities and boredom had caused so much damage. None of us would ever be the same. Our family was broken. I really hoped Matt was worth it. "Can you drive, sweetheart?" Joyce asked. "I'm fine," I replied. "I just have a lot on my mind." "Oh," she said. "Have we made a decision?" I was thinking about other things, but I decided one more sweet lie wouldn't hurt. I wanted to make her as happy as possible for this last day together. The whole point of today was to capture a glimpse of the life we should have had, to create one last memory of the love that had defined most of our adult lives. "I'm trying to think of names," I whispered. Her expression was priceless. It was a mix of love, adoration, and passion. The look she always gave me until 2 weeks ago, when she started her affair with Matt. After that, all I saw was guilt and doubt. "Are we starting tonight, baby?" she whispered. "We should probably wait until I get back from my trip the day after tomorrow," I said. "We don't want Jessica to hear us, and that would be awkward." As we drove home and stopped at the airport, I felt conflicted. Joyce seemed like her old self again. The way she kept holding my hand showed that, despite everything, she still loved me. Maybe, as she suggested, it was just boredom and loneliness that had made her lose sight of what truly mattered. Was this a forgivable mistake in a strong marriage that I was blowing up due to my pride and insecurities? I needed to sort out my feelings. Most men, myself included, don't process emotions well. Women do. Men react on instinct first, then analyze and follow logic. My first instinct was to cut Joyce out of my life completely, and my logical side told me that if she did it once and got away with it, she'd probably do it again. Both instinct and logic were urging me to move on. No matter what my heart said, I wasn't willing to spend my life at the mercy of her whims. Life's too short not to be happy. At the airport, Joyce and Jess dozed off while I dropped Brian off. I slipped him some cash even though he already had a debit card for expenses. I hugged him tightly. "Dad, don't forget. Email me as soon as you know which office you're transferring to. Jess and I are planning on going to Hawaii. I'll bring Maggie for Christmas, but we'll be at her parents' for Thanksgiving. That should give you time to get the new place ready," he said. "But keep me posted. Thanksgiving on the beach sounds awesome." "Brian, what if your mom and I are still together?" I asked. He gave me a skeptical look. "Then Christmas will probably be awkward with you checking under the tree to see if her boyfriend left her gifts, or if she invited him over, counting chairs at the table and constantly watching the chimney to make sure she's not flirting with Santa Claus. I love you, Dad. Just do what you need to do. We'll support you, whatever you decide." He gently stroked Jessica's head and kissed her lightly. "Don't tell her I did that," he said with a grin. Then walked to the terminal, no longer just my son but a grown man. I got back in the car and started driving home. Joyce, half asleep, reached for my hand, and Jessica snored softly in the back. Even in her sleep, Joyce instinctively reached for me. "Love you, Billy," she murmured. This only deepened my confusion. How could a woman tell me she loved me even in her sleep? Could that be faked? Another thing struck me. The way she acted around Matt was different from how she was with me. Maybe she was pretending with him, or had she been pretending with me for nearly 20 years? Was I really about to throw away 20 years of our lives because she'd slept with some loser twice? I started doubting my plan. It felt cowardly to leave without telling her why. Even a dog gets a newspaper smack to know not to mess up. Didn't Joyce deserve an explanation after 20 years? Didn't she deserve a chance to respond? Maybe it was my rational side coming through. The best way might be to make some coffee, invite Matt over, and have an adult conversation. What on earth was I thinking? She cheated. She didn't deserve anything. "Wake me up when we get to the airport so I can say goodbye to Brian," she mumbled. "We left the airport 20 minutes ago," I said. "We'll be home in about 15 minutes. Joyce's eyes widened. "Brian's gone?" she asked. I nodded. "But he didn't even say goodbye to me," she said, clearly hurt. "He kissed me goodbye," Jessica said, twisting the knife. "It's hard to pretend to sleep when your monkey brother's licking you. I guess that's his way of showing love." Go back to sleep, Jess, I said. Her smirk in the rearview mirror showed she had gotten what she wanted. He knew you were tired, honey, I told Joyce. He wanted to let you rest. He knows you'll have to work even harder on those committees since you took today off to be with us. I need to be with you, she said. No committees, no charity events, no projects. Just the one we're going to do together. Was this just another lie, or was she being honest? I couldn't tell the difference anymore. I pulled into the driveway and carried Jessica to her room. Love you, Daddy, she murmured. Forever and ever. I love you too, my little angel, I said, as I turned to leave. Don't forget to call me when my plane lands so I can hear how she reacted, she said. Suddenly, her eyes were wide open and alert. And Dad, I'll live with you. In our state, kids over 13 can choose which parent they want to live with. I'm 17. So pick Hawaii because I look great in a bikini. Claudia and I get along great. I wondered why she mentioned Claudia. Jess, if you weren't asleep, why did I need to carry you up the stairs? I asked. Because today is the last time for some things, she said softly. I remember when I was little and felt so safe when you carried me up those steps and tucked me in. Neither of us will ever be in this house again after tonight. So I wanted to feel it one last time. I just nodded. Maybe it'll be another house. Or maybe someday, you'll see me carrying my granddaughter up the stairs in your house, I said. Yes. That would be great, Dad. And you can tell her why she doesn't have a grandmother, she said bitterly. Who knows? I said. Maybe we can still fix this. No, Dad, she said seriously. You can't. You're not that person. And if you were, you wouldn't be the dad I love and respect. It's time for you to start fresh with someone who truly loves you. Maybe someone's already waiting for you. I returned to the car, where Joyce was still snoring. I opened the door and lifted her out, her arms instinctively wrapped around my neck as I carried her to our room. I laid her on the bed, undressed her, covered her with a blanket, and kissed her one last time as the day came to an end. Love you, Billy, she said as I lay beside her. Is it true or just a sweet lie? It didn't seem to matter anymore. Love you too, Joyce, I said, as the last tear I'd ever shed for her rolled down my cheek. I lay in the bed we'd shared since the start of our marriage. It felt symbolic to be here, considering the end, almost as if I was closing a chapter. Questions raced through my mind as I tried to sleep. Was I being rational? Should we try to fix things? Did I love her enough to try? Had she and Matt been in this bed? The thought made me furious. Did she really choose that loser over me, or was he just there when she was vulnerable? I had worked my entire life to give her everything she wanted, and this was how she repaid me. Somehow, I fell into a restless sleep. I dreamed of Joyce and Matt living in my house with my kids while I was stuck in his mother's basement. I was up before sunrise, showered, dressed, and packed my suitcase with all my personal items. I walked quietly down the hall and hugged my daughter goodbye. I love you, Dad, she said, forcing herself to wake up. The adventure begins, she smiled. See you in a couple of months or maybe sooner. Say hi to Claudia for me. Jessica would head to the airport in about 3 hours. After that, Joyce would be alone for the first time in her life. I hoped that whatever came next, Matt could make her happy. The surprises I had planned for them would test that love, I thought with a grin. I climbed into my Mustang, took one last look at the house, and started the car. The powerful engine roared, and a part of me felt sad. The end of my marriage felt like failure, but I was also ready for what the future might hold. On the way to the airport, I called the office. I planned to leave a message for Claudia, my former assistant, but couldn't reach her voicemail. I dialed the main office number and surprisingly got an actual person instead of a recording. This is Ellen Magnuson, telephone operator and receptionist, she said. I was shocked she was at the office at 6 a.m. I'm always here at this time, she added. Ellen, I need to leave a message for Claudia Denton, I said. Claudia no longer works here, Ellen replied. She left yesterday. Where did she transfer to? I asked. I don't have that information, she said. This surprised me. Claudia had been almost like a second wife for the past 10 years. I'd hired her right out of college, and she was the perfect assistant. I regretted treating her poorly. I'd been too caught up in my issues with Joyce to realize it. I decided I'd take a few days to find out where she'd gone and get in touch with her. With that resolved, I drove to the transport company I'd contracted with. Naturally, I chose the Honolulu office as my new location. Jessica had no influence on that decision, but I was glad it would make her happy. I drove my Mustang to the transport company near the airport. They were supposed to ship my car to the coast and ferry it to the island where it would arrive about a day after me. I took a shuttle from the transport office to the airport, checked in, and waited at the terminal for my flight. About 15 minutes later, a woman sat beside me. Without looking up from my magazine, I noticed she had a familiar pleasant scent. Her legs were slim and well-toned, not as thick and hot as Joyce's, but likely more appealing to most men. My gaze traveled up to her small waist and larger chest, proportionally accentuated on her petite frame. "It's not polite to stare at a stranger's chest," she said. "Besides, aren't you married?" "I was," I replied. "Now, I'm open to new opportunities." "Shouldn't you be at work, Claudia?" I smiled. "You were the best assistant anyone could ask for." "I know," she said, smiling. "But now I'm open to new possibilities." "Claudia, you didn't need to leave the company because of me," I started. "I didn't leave," she said. "I'm just transferring to where you're headed." "How did you know when I was leaving and where I was going?" I asked. "First, I handled all your paperwork, remember?" She smiled. "Second, Jessica told me what was happening. She thinks we could be a good match and didn't want you to face this alone." I looked at her with suspicion, but she just smiled. "Bill, I've wanted to be more than just your assistant for a long time," she said. "Don't I deserve a chance to? I'm not asking for marriage or commitment, just for us to take things one day at a time." I smiled and held out my hand. Joyce woke up when the phone rang for the 4th time. It went to voicemail after 3 rings. Whoever was calling so early really wanted to talk. She wondered why Bill wasn't answering. He should have been up by now for his trip to the airport. She'd been having a wonderful dream about what she would do to Bill when he came home. She couldn't believe she'd managed to keep her relationship with Matt hidden. She had it all. A husband who supported her lifestyle and a young man who adored her. Life was perfect. "Hello?" she answered sharply. "Joyce, it's me, Matt," came the voice on the other end. "I can't come today." "Maybe never," he slurred. Damn, he sounded drunk. Why is he drunk so early? She thought. To hell with it. I decided to end things with Matt yesterday anyway. There was no future with him. She loved Bill deeply. The picnic had reminded her of that. Now that they were planning another child, she didn't need the distraction Matt provided. It had just been a midlife crisis. Maybe there would be others, but as long as she was careful, Bill would never know. "I love you, Joyce," Matt said, his voice breaking. "Are you crying, Matt?" she asked. Great, she thought. Just what I needed. This fool is trying to make it difficult to break up. It's so annoying. Some people can recognize when it's over and ruin everything, thinking they can hold on forever just because they want to. He needs to move on. "It's over, Joyce." "I feel terrible," he whined. "What's wrong, Matt?" she asked, just to be polite. "Are you sick? Hurt?" She was relieved her husband wasn't as pathetic as Matt. What did I ever see in him? He's not attractive, fit, or smart. He has no ambition and still lives with his mom, and he's awful in bed. She'd chosen him because no one would suspect her, and he posed no threat to Bill. She thought she could teach him to satisfy her. But before anything serious started, she realized she loved Bill too much to go through with it. "My mom's going to eliminate me," Matt said. "We have a problem, Joyce. I love you, but I can't take this anymore. It's not worth it." "What are you talking about?" Joyce wondered, now irritated. "This morning, I went in for my shift at the supermarket. I thought I could earn an extra $10 helping unload trucks," Matt explained. I wanted to use that money to buy you a gift, to show how much I care. But when I got to work, they sent me to the manager's office." His voice wavered. He said they have a policy against employees fraternizing with customers, especially married ones, and they had to fire me to avoid a lawsuit. I lost my job, Joyce. I'd worked there since high school, and they just let me go. He started crying again. As I rode my bike home, I started wondering if someone had found out about us and was trying to stir up trouble. I had just passed the alley behind the store and began pedaling faster when, out of nowhere, a big teenager came out of the alley and hit me so hard I fell off my bike. When I got up, he was gone, and so was my bike. I headed home, but not long after, 2 large men attacked me. They knocked me badly. The entire time they kept saying I should have known better than to mess with a married woman. I woke up in the hospital and my mom was there. She told me to call you and tell you to stay away from me, Joyce, but I'll always love you. The call ended, leaving Joyce with nothing but a dial tone. She didn't know whether to laugh with relief or cry out of guilt for what had happened to Matt. She was certain Matt's mother was behind all of it. It seemed like her version of tough love. She must have discovered Joyce was married and took it upon herself to teach her son a lesson. Instead of grounding him or taking away privileges, she got him fired, arranged for his bike to be stolen, and since he was too old for a spanking, hired thugs to knock him up. Maybe this was for the best, she thought, because her heart belonged to the only man who truly mattered to her. There was no place for Matt in her life. She decided to make breakfast. Maybe I'll take Jessica to the airport myself. Jess wanted to prove she was independent by taking a cab, but we needed time to bond. Joyce had felt some tension between them during the picnic and wanted to address it. Until recently, they'd been a close family, but now something felt off. At least things seemed better with Bill. Yesterday had been perfect, and she had done everything she could to show him she loved him wholeheartedly. After a couple of weeks of flirtation with the idea of an affair, she felt sure he trusted her again. When Joyce entered the kitchen, she noticed a large envelope on the table. Just as she started to open it, a car horn sounded outside. She looked out the window and saw a taxi waiting. Joyce opened the envelope as she heard footsteps from upstairs. Jessica was coming down. As Joyce read the note inside, a chill went down her spine. "Press play on your DVD player, then read page 2, it said. Joyce pressed play and watched in horror as footage of her latest encounter with Matt played on the living room TV. Jessica walked past and said, "Goodbye, Mom. I hope you enjoyed your last day with Dad. He wanted you to have a beautiful memory, but you won't see him or me again." Joyce looked back at the letter. At first, she thought it was from Matt's mother, but as she continued reading, her worst fears came true. "Goodbye, Joyce. I hope Matt was worth losing your husband, your marriage, and your family. I loved you deeply, and your betrayal broke me. In a few minutes, someone will arrive with divorce papers. You need to sign them as soon as you get them. If you sign, we will proceed with an uncontested divorce citing irreconcilable differences. My lawyer will reach out about custody arrangements for Jessica. You'll receive 25% of our shared assets, including the house, which is already up for sale. You have 30 days to find a new place to live. I sincerely hope Matt has room for you in his basement. If you refuse to sign, I will ruin your reputation so badly that staying in this town won't be an option. The money is generous, considering the life we had that you destroyed for reasons I can't fathom. I don't want to see, hear from, or talk to you ever again, so I'll never know why you did it. And it doesn't matter. Yesterday was bittersweet, and I struggled to consider if we could make it work. I thought I might be able to forgive, and I never stopped loving you, Joyce. But I can't forget what you did. I'll never trust you again. I couldn't live constantly wondering if meetings or shopping trips were excuses to see someone else. You've done this many times, haven't you, Joyce? Maybe not with sex until recently, but you lied to my face, kissed me, and betrayed me. In the end, it wasn't a lack of love or my unwillingness to forgive that ended us, it was the lies. All those sweet little lies. Joyce felt hollow after reading the letter. She never expected this outcome or wanted it. The affair had only been out of boredom. Her lifelong dream was to be a wife and mother, and when she met Bill in college, she felt her dreams had come true. But as she got older, she felt life slipping by. The last few years were especially hard. The kids were almost grown. Brian already was, and Jessica was nearly there. They didn't need her anymore. Bill had his career, and even though he made choices to limit work travel so he could spend more time with the family, he was gone every weekday. He had Claudia, who managed everything for him at work so efficiently that Joyce never had to assist with anything related to his job. After Claudia's first couple of years working for Bill, Joyce's jealousy grew so strong she stopped inviting her to parties and social events. It didn't help that Claudia was younger and more attractive. One of Joyce's biggest frustrations came at a company dinner when someone asked, "Are Bill and Claudia married?" "They look great together," someone else commented. "And they work so well together too," added another. Joyce began to suspect Bill might be having an affair with Claudia. The way Claudia looked at Bill made Joyce sure that if given a chance, Claudia would pursue him. Joyce hired a private investigator to find out the truth. After 3 months and spending a large portion of the money her late father left her on 24-hour surveillance, the agency concluded that Bill and Claudia's relationship was purely professional and friendly. There was nothing more between them. Joyce felt torn between relief and frustration. She had wasted so much money to confirm what she had always known, that Bill was faithful. He loved her and their kids too much to risk their family. Yet, she sometimes questioned why he loved her so deeply. Most of the time, Joyce knew she was smart, but she also knew she wasn't what men fantasized about. Her chest was average at best. She had a large backside, and her legs were so thick she needed custom-made boots, but Bill adored those traits. He would often whisper, "Wrap those thick legs around me while we make love." His desire for her seemed endless until 2 weeks ago. Suddenly, she realized she hadn't been discreet at all. Bill had probably known her suspicions from the start, and she was too naive to see it. She felt lost. She heard the sound of a car door closing outside. Looking out the window, she saw the taxi driver shutting the trunk after loading Jessica's suitcases. If anyone knew where Bill was and how to reach him, it was Jessica. She and her father were always close. Bill loved their son, but he cherished their daughter, and she loved him just as fiercely. Maybe that's why Jessica had been so cold and sharp with Joyce lately. It was clear she knew about Joyce's betrayal and expressed her disapproval through her frosty demeanor and biting comments. "Jessica, wait," Joyce called as her daughter stepped into the taxi. Jessica turned, looked at her mother, and simply raised her middle finger. Without a word, she got in and shut the door. The taxi drove off, and Joyce, still in her robe, ran after it down the street. She stepped on a sharp rock and cut her leg, hobbling back to the house. Just as she reached her front door, she heard a whistle from a neighbor's house. The old man across the street waved. "I need your help," Joyce said, pulling her robe closed. "Can I use your phone?" "You've had your cheap thrill looking, so you owe me that." The old man stood and walked to his house. Joyce followed, still glancing around, wary of any eyes on her. "The phone's there," the old man said. Joyce found the phone book under the table where the phone sat. She reached for it, but before she could open it, he closed it. She stared at him in surprise. "What?" she asked. "I have a question for you," he replied. She nodded for him to continue. "What's the opposite of good?" "It's bad," she said. "No," he answered. "The opposite of good is better. I had a good life and I ruined it trying to make it better." He handed her a key. "What's this?" she asked, examining it. "The key to your house. Your husband gave it to me to water your plants and pick up your mail while you were on vacation." Joyce looked at him and said, "Thank you." She hurried back across the street and unlocked her door. She went straight to the phone and called Bill's cell. It went to voicemail. She wanted to leave a message but didn't know what to say. She knew she had limited chances to tell him how sorry she was. She decided she would leave a message later once she gathered her thoughts. If she accepted Bill's terms, she would be okay for a while. Their house was worth over $300,000, and 25% of that would be $75,000. It would sustain her temporarily, but it wasn't enough for long-term survival. She needed to find a job and a new home. The money wouldn't last. Buying a comparable house would eat up her share within a couple of years, and her savings would run dry shortly after. Joyce had never worked. What could she even do? Her life was falling apart over nothing. She needed a way to get Bill to forgive her. The doorbell rang, and she stood up to answer it. "Joyce Williams?" asked a young woman with a briefcase. "Yes," Joyce said, wondering what she was selling. "You've been served?" the woman said. "What?" Joyce said. "No. It's too soon. I'm not ready. I don't know what to do. I need to return these papers with your signature," the woman said, looking bored. Joyce thought about everything she had done, and all the people she had hurt with her careless actions. If Bill had dragged her reputation through the mud, more people would have been affected. She did the only thing she could do: she signed the papers. She closed the door behind the woman and collapsed at her desk, crying uncontrollably. 2 days and 4,563 miles later, Claudia stepped out of their hotel bathroom and touched Bill's shoulder as he cried over what Joyce had thrown away. "Things will get better, dear," she said, trying to comfort him, though she knew most people never truly forget their first marriage or the other parent of their children. In time, she and Bill would build a life together, maybe even have kids. But Joyce would always be a memory, so telling him it would get better was a little lie. On December 24th, Joyce walked through her old neighborhood, ignored by former friends and neighbors. Even her best friends next door avoided her while putting up Christmas decorations. Bill had kept his promise not to spread what she did, but Matt's mother told everyone, painting Joyce as the older woman who seduced her son. The gossip spread fast, leaving Joyce an outcast, only approached by unwanted suitors. Joyce knocked on the door of her last friend, an old lonely man who welcomed her in. "Trouble loves company, Joyce?" he said. "Weren't you supposed to have your kids over for the holidays?" "I hope so," Joyce replied bitterly. In just 3 months, she had become a stranger to herself. A far cry from the woman who had cheated on Bill. "Brian's grown now," she continued. He and his fiancée decided to spend Christmas with Bill in Hawaii. They're enjoying the beach. He said he loved the idea of Christmas on the sand with the whole ocean to throw stones into with his dad and Jessica. The court ruled we alternate holidays, so I had Thanksgiving and Bill got Christmas. Jessica asked to spend part of her holiday with Brian and Maggie, so she'll be with them for New Year's. Dan, who had been listening intently, raised an eyebrow. "So Jessica didn't care," Joyce snapped. "She came because the court ordered it. She arrived Wednesday, went straight to bed, barely spoke Thursday, and left right after dinner. She flew to Hawaii, not back to Paris to join them. I only found out when I called Brian and spoke to Maggie, who didn't know to keep it quiet." Joyce's eyes welled up. Maggie said it was the first time they'd all been together since Thanksgiving. They celebrated on Friday when Jess got there, even watching recorded football games together. I invited Bill to Thanksgiving, imagining him lonely. But instead, Maggie mentioned how great Claudia looked in a bikini. They celebrated on the deck of the house Bill bought for them. Claudia, not only built like a model, is also an amazing cook. She paused, biting her lip. I must be clairvoyant. I always knew that woman wanted Bill, so I hired detectives to watch them. They never met, and wouldn't have if I hadn't pushed him to her. I sent Bill a Christmas gift to remind him I was still here, but it was returned unopened with a big green sticker saying, "Parcels from this address are not accepted." Joyce's voice dropped. I called Bill's cell, which he had given me for discussing Jessica's matters since we share custody, though she chose to live with him. He waived child support because I don't work, which I thought was kind at first, but really it was so he wouldn't have to speak to me. He avoids any contact. Jessica's court-ordered visits are all I have, but she barely speaks or interacts when she's here, Joyce continued. I called Bill's phone and Claudia answered. I knew he was there and had handed her the phone. I heard Christmas music and people chatting, clearly having a good time. I asked Claudia if she was still Bill's assistant. I would never work for anyone else, she said. I asked what else she does for him, and she said, whatever he wants. I almost cried, but tried to be gracious. I asked if they got the gift I sent, and she said it might have been lost in the mail, downplaying it to spare my feelings. Then I realized I was on speakerphone because when I asked for Jessica, I heard her whisper, no. I swallowed my pride and asked if I could visit for Christmas with their gifts. Claudia just said, oh wait, there's Jessica. Jess took the phone, and I told her I hadn't heard from her in a month. She said she'd been busy with school. When I asked what she wanted for Christmas, she said nothing. She told me she wanted me to keep being the best mom I could, and her dad and stepmom would handle the rest. Even though Bill isn't married to Claudia, she's already more of a mother to Jessica than I am. My own mom blames me too, always saying I was out of my mind. Maybe it was a midlife crisis, hormonal imbalance, or temporary insanity. Bill loves you, my mom said. Give him time, but time is running out, and he's moving on. Now my mother blames me for not seeing her grandchildren. Claudia even flew my mom to Hawaii for Christmas since Bill's parents were there for Thanksgiving. Maggie meant the entire family when she said everyone would be together. Joyce's voice grew faint. Deep down, I believe Bill still loves me. That's why he hasn't married Claudia yet. But he's trying to forget me. He's with a younger, prettier woman, yet he still struggles to let go. He must have loved me deeply. He always said so. How did I get bored with that kind of love? Now I'm sitting here, bitter and gaining weight, knowing it's only a matter of time until he forgets me completely and marries Claudia. She sighed. Bill always said he could forgive the act but not the betrayal. I lost my perfect life over a few small lies. Do not forget to support us with a like and subscribe to the channel. See you in the next video.